Stuart, your Vice President of Education Kent Union, and I'm back with another episode of the Office Hour. Today's a little bit different because instead of all the other officers with me, I am spending some time with our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, April McMahon. Say hello, April.
Hello.
Hello. And me and April are going to talk a little bit about how the university and the union work together to hopefully explain it to some students, because it can be quite complicated from the outside. So, April is one of the most senior staff in the university. She's on a thing called Executive Group, which are basically the top 6 head honchos. Includes the Vice-Chancellor and the other Deputy Vice-Chancellors. And they're basically where the most important decisions get made at the university. April's got a very special job because she's in charge of education, all of it, at the same time. So, April, would you be able to sort of go into a little bit of detail about what you do in your role and how it affects students?
I can try, but you've made me sound genuinely terrifying now, so I don't know if I can be in a room with myself at this point. So I have had the usual sort of academic career, you know, doing teaching and research, and gradually over the years I've had more and more of a leadership role. And now I get to do the best bit of leadership role, which is the student-facing bit. So the idea is that everything I do should be to support student experience at Kent, and it's particularly around the academic student experience, but not just that, because I hope we'd agree that the student experience is partly academic, but it's partly co-curricular.
We do agree, yes.
We do. Hoorah. Well, that's a good start. So I do quite a lot of things that are boring but necessary, like run committees. Sit on those committees, make sure that the decisions actually get made. And I do various things that are genuinely exciting, like think about how we can make things better for students at Kent, not just now, but actually the next cohorts of students who will come here, because our student body changes, you know.
It's quite a strategic role, isn't it? In the
That's the idea.
Mm.
That's the idea. So yeah, we do have a student experience and education strategy as part of our overall university plan and strategy. And I think we're pretty much unique in the sector, because that education and student experience strategy was developed absolutely in partnership with Kent Union, on the back of some work that you did some years ago as Kent Union.
I think it was the Big Kent Review in 2014.
That is precisely the thing. So that was before you and before me.
So that was a long time ago. I don't know how many students listening to this will even have been here in 2014, but this is the kind of longer time planning we're talking about. So a lot of your work for your role is sort of stuff that you're planning on implementing in a few years or 5 to 10 years. So really quite a while.
It's a total mix, because you never know when you come in the morning. Is it going to all be about planning for what the university's going to be like and how you can make sure that it's still here and being successful, you know, in 5 years, 10 years' time? Or something just happens out of left field and you've got to fix it today because somebody's got a problem today.
Yeah.
So it's a great mixture of the strategic and the totally just mending fences that needs to happen on a day-to-day basis, which I love. I don't think you'd like my job if you wanted to know that you were coming in the morning and you knew exactly that what was in your diary was actually going to be what you did.
In my opinion, that's what keeps it exciting. But a certain type of person, I imagine. You mentioned just now something about committees. Now, obviously, me and you know what committees are because we sit on what feels like a million every day. But to a regular student, I don't think they would necessarily understand how committees work or why they're important. Should we talk about that a little bit, maybe?
Absolutely.
Who wants to start?
Ooh, well, where do we start with committees? I mean, we've got a whole pile of them. Kent has the committee disease. I've got to say, we've got more committees than spots if you've got measles. It's just extraordinary how many committees we have. And we do need to make sure that we keep looking at all of those and making sure that we still need them, that they're fit for purpose and so on. But the key thing is you can't get everybody in the university in a room to make decisions. That would mean that just with students, you'd be trying to consult directly with 18,000 people. You can't. It's like consulting a small town, well, a decent sized town actually. So just as you've got, elected representatives, or you've got councillors, or you've got volunteers who are trying to help you in a town, to actually make decisions. So in an organisation like the university, you've got people who've got particular kind of expertise, and they would have a representative role, and they'd get together as, let's say, the education committee that makes the ultimate decisions beyond Senate, which is our kind of key academic body. And those committees actually look at the case to make changes, or to look at things differently, or to figure out what's working well and what needs a bit of a second look.
So on all these committees as well, there are student representatives.
Yep.
They act in a similar way to what you just described. They're elected by the student body, and they are Kent Union volunteers sent to these committees to represent students. What value do you think a student rep brings to a committee, if I may ask?
I'll tell you one thing. A committee will sit up and pay attention when your student rep speaks more than anybody. And I count myself as the chair there, that actually when a student voice is saying something on a committee, people will sit up and pay attention. And I think there's massive value in that, because without that student voice directly, you are just second guessing. It is quite a long time since I've been a student myself. In fact, it was in the last century.
Oh dear.
And so if I'm going to stay in touch, it can't be by me kind of making up a story about students today on the basis of what it was like when I was at university. It's way different. And so you need to hear it from people who are having that experience now, or who have recently had that experience, in the case of our esteemed sabbatical officers.
It was only a couple of years ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Well, there you are. You see, it's a darn sight closer than when I was a student myself. So you have to have that student voice. It seems to me that's non-negotiable.
I mean, I would agree. So we have about 400 odd student reps at this university, and they sit on all levels of committee, from the lowest, in air quotes, student staff liaison committees, almost called SLCs there, that's an acronym no one would know, where they discuss problems with academics and with some of their admin staff in their schools, and it works up to school boards, and then faculty committees, and then finally to education board that April just mentioned. And it's surprising how important some of the issues that come from those SLCs are, and how they do incorporate into the discussions happening at the higher up boards. Very little seems to happen here without solid student support. I feel like if I said no, and then all the faculty reps also said no, there would be a very good argument to not do something. Do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, you would need to go back and do a piece of work on why there's a mismatch. Why has this committee got to the stage where it's thinking that a particular way forward would be the right thing?
Over my last 2 years, I think that's happened exactly 0 times, but I'm sure it does happen at some institutions somewhere. We're very lucky here that the university spends a lot of time trying to get students into rooms rather than trying to keep them out, which some universities do try and keep them out, which we don't think is particularly productive in the long scheme of things.
It just should be business as usual, that you've always got student representation. And actually, I think one of the important things here at Kent is that we do that for appointments as well, by which
true.
I mean, when you take on a new person to be
Deputy Vice-Chancellor.
A Deputy Vice-Chancellor.
The Vice-Chancellor
Totally,
or a
and
dean.
we had students involved in all of those, and with heads of school and so on, we need to have student voice.
I think that's a really actually unique aspect of Kent, that we are involved in the recruitment panels. I have to say I've not been disappointed with the recruitment since the students have been on the recruitment panels. I think all the staff we've hired are wonderful.
I can't say anything now. 'Cause
Fair enough.
How do you think I got here? But I do think that that's something we should actually just be taken for granted now. That shouldn't be a big win. That we've got student voice involved in those sorts of recruitment and appointments processes. And the fact that it doesn't really get discussed, it just gets taken for granted that that's the right way to work, shows that it works well, Because I wouldn't want you to be thinking that it's all about committees. None of us want to have days that are all about committees.
Some of us do have days that are all about committees.
Occasionally.
I think I've had half an hour free today. It's been a pretty intense day. But we do other things like consultations, and we go out and ask students questions and stuff. But that's more of my area than it is April's. So yeah, it's really important that you speak to your student reps, because these issues do go up through the chain, and they do end up in front of April on her committees, saying there's a problem here, there's a problem there. And the more that you talk to myself or any of the student reps, the more that we know about these things, and we can actually raise them and start getting some of them fixed. Because I was doing, I was outside the plaza about a month ago now, doing my space wall, as it's so lovingly called, where students come in to put a sticker on my wall. And I found out lots of little issues about specific courses, specific schools. I'm like, if they had mentioned this to a student rep, this may have already been fixed. And that's why it's so important that you vote for your student reps and you talk to them.
But it's not just about putting things right either. Not to contradict you, because you're quite right. It's about spotting and solving problems. But it's also about just having those really good ideas about how we can do things better. It might be okay now, but how can it be really good? How can it be stellar? What we do it can.
I'm trying to think of some ideas, but there have definitely been ideas from students since I've started. That everyone's gone, oh, that is the best idea, we'll do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't think of it off the top of my head now. I'm a terrible sap. Oh no.
You'll have them all gathered up somewhere.
Yes, they're written down somewhere. So a question asked in my last scrutiny panel, in fact, April, was why do things take so long in the university? And can I do anything to fix it? Which I thought was very, very brave of them to... Not brave. Overestimating how much influence I have, perhaps.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating.
Because I would argue that you probably sit on the most committees of a staff member.
I try not to count them, to be honest, but I think that... it's like how long is a piece of string. It depends how you mean how long. When you are here as a student, and if you're here as a postgraduate taught student, you're going to be here for a year basically, and naturally you want to be thinking, what can we get done in the period when I'm here at Kent to fix this issue or to put this good idea into practice. Even if you're an undergraduate student, you're going to be here 3 years, 4 years at the most, doing one of our undergraduate programs. And you can feel sometimes that something's been started off and you get all the way to graduation, you haven't really seen it coming through yet, and that can be really frustrating. And I do think as universities we can deservedly have a bad record sometimes, because it takes us ages to do consultation and so on. Now, there's some positives about that, because we're not one of these sorts of private sector businesses that would just say, right, this new thing is happening, don't care if you don't like it, this is the way it's going to be. It's more a community where you've got to have consultation and a bit of chat about things and decide whether this is the right thing or whether there's a different way that you should approach this particular issue. And because there's a lot of us, if you count up the students and staff.
About 20,000.
More, It's going to take a while to actually figure out that you've actually allowed people to air any views that they might have. We try and make that a bit quicker by doing it through these committee structures rather than, having to go and sit down with every individual in the university and try and figure out what worries they might have about something new. But even so, it takes a little while actually to make sure that you've surfaced any worries that there might be, because those worries are legitimate. They need to be listened to and understood, so that we can go forward and say, this is a new thing that everybody's embracing. Now, even then, it can take a while for everybody to come on board. So, give you an example. One of my favourite things is lecture capture. We love lecture capture.
I think everyone loves lecture capture.
Not everyone loves lecture capture.
All the students I've spoken to love lecture capture.
Yes, absolutely. Now, it can be more of an issue for some of our academics, and that can be for really good reasons. So when we started really trying to push on getting lecture capture numbers up, because just 3 years ago it was like 9% of our lectures were being captured in the university, and now it's about 56-57%. It's not there yet, but it's going in the right direction. And we've got that far because we've had really solid support from students and student reps saying this is what we, not just what we want, I quite fancy lecture capture, it's what you need.
Yeah.
There are really good legitimate reasons why people can't always be in the room,
Now this was slightly before my time, lecture capture. It sort of was implemented just as I became a sabbatical. I believe that wouldn't have got anywhere if the students hadn't pushed so hard for it over the 6 years prior.
I'm sure that's
arriving.
right. I'm sure that's right. It was all set up as being an issue that students were really passionate about. And, you students here have got friendship groups right across the sector, right across the world,
Yes.
actually, so they're talking to folks in other universities in the UK and to people in Australia and wherever else, and they're going, look, this is just standard in a lot of places. Why have we not got it? But we did have some of our academic colleagues who were saying, look, I'm talking about live cases in, say, social work, for instance. I can't be recording this stuff.
Yeah.
There can be incredibly contentious or very private details that you're talking about in class. And it was then easy for us to say, well, don't record that bit. We're not trying to do anything that is going to be uncomfortable or unreasonable for anybody. But we do have to look at what students are expecting and deserving. Frankly, you, to my mind, you cannot have a student who's in hospital who's saying one of my 3 module conveners this term allows me to see the material and the other 2 don't.
Yeah.
How is that okay? So, there can be special circumstances that mean you can't record that lecture. But on balance, we've got to get to a place where we need to look at what students are needing, and they can make that case a lot more powerfully than I can.
Yes.
Actually, probably even than you can,
Oh, how dare you, April?
Nearly.
So that would have gone through the committee structures.
It did.
So it would have. One of the reasons that the university is so slow is there's a series of committees you have to go through. They're like hurdles. You have to get over each hurdle to get to the end. The end is Senate. Senate is also the reason we have the Senate building on campus. As you may have noticed, it's not named after anyone like everything else, because the Senate used to be in there. Now it's a wonderful postgraduate study hub. It's a humble brag. So that would have had to go through all the faculty, school boards, at least the faculty education boards.
That's right, and then it went to education
up to education board.
Then it goes to Senate.
Then it goes to Senate, and it would have been debated all these different places about the positives, the negatives, how staff think it will impact students' behaviours, etc., etc. And when you have to do that for most big decisions, so if Humanities Contact Hours is currently trying to work its way through the faculty board structure. It's going to a faculty board meeting next week, I believe. And then they'll have to go through education board, then through Senate. It's just a lot of levels that you have to get across. And if Senate say, no, we don't want this, you have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, it's like snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
If you remember, snakes and ladders from your misspent youth. You think you've got all the way to the top of a ladder, and then you move one space to the right and you go straight back down a snake again.
Sometimes if someone's responsible for implementing it and they decide that they don't want to implement it, and they can just pull it, and then you have to go back to square one, redesign it. And
we try and structure it in such a way that once you've got through one committee stage, you're not going to go back absolutely to first principles. But the single thing to me that makes the biggest difference is to have student voice speaking for something. It's really powerful in those settings.
Because I know you did say this quite a while ago now, but the people stopping and listening to student voice, I've found a lot of my meetings, they all prick up like meerkats. They're all, the backs are up, and it's like, they're all listening to everything that we're saying. Yeah. And that doesn't just go for me, that goes for the student reps in there as well. Yeah.
And the better prepared student reps are, that's not saying that you treat it like a dramatic performance. Well, I suppose occasionally
some
people do, but that's true of staff on committees, not just students. But the better prepared and the more confident student reps feel, and that's a lot about the training and the sort of support that Kent Union gives to student reps, then the more able you are actually to make that case. And the key is not that it's this sort of amazing speech that you deliver or whatever, or that you're on top of all the sort of bizarre acronyms that are in all the papers, because there is a lot of them about. the key is that it's authentic, that you're actually saying this is what we feel and this is why, and just to have that rationale set out is
this is happening
fantastic.
right now, please fix it, make our lives better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the slowness, you're right, is that one committee kind of feeds into another. There's also a really good reason why things have to be a little bit slower sometimes, which is you can't just change things. Because students are actually literally signing a contract with us when they come to the university. And there's certain things that students are saying, this is what we undertake to do. And we are saying as the university, this is what we're going to provide. So if you're then going to change that in some respect, even if on the face of it looks as if it's totally in line with what students want, you've just got to think that through and make sure that students are aware. So if we make a big change to a programme of study, it's not just about telling the students who are here now. We've got to write to all the students who've got an offer to come and do that programme of study in the future, because otherwise we're kind of breaking our contract with our students. So
the slowness isn't designed to be slow for slowness' sake. There are reasons that it does take a while. Also, sometimes you do have to talk about these things at several levels. There are lots of people that are involved, especially the bigger decisions like Humanities Content House will be and lecture capture was.
I mean, I have my days, where I think, just get a move on.
We passed this 7 years ago. Get on with it.
But on the whole, and I know I need to work on my patience. It's not my best thing. But on the whole, I think, there are better reasons to talk about these things and make a good decision than rush something through. People have got different definitions of what constitutes rushing.
Yes, because as you went through, the student timelines are all different. They're 3 years. They expect things to be done in a term, in a year. But university staff, their timelines here are typically quite a lot longer, so they sort of plan, like we were talking about at the beginning, you plan far further ahead because you have that luxury, because you're going to be, you can assume you're going to be here for X years. Yeah,
and things have got knock-on effects.
Yeah.
You want to do something immediately because it's going to be good for students, but actually that might have a consequence that
might
you haven't
break something
thought of.
somewhere else.
So I think a few years ago, there was suddenly let's have presentations as assessments. Great idea, build your confidence, good for your graduate attributes in that respect. All sorts of good things come from doing presentations. Loads of graduate jobs. When you leave, you're going to have to get up and do presentations. But I think maybe there were some schools where people got very enthusiastic about that, and you might have found that you had lots of presentations and maybe not very much else for a little while in terms of assessments, and you have to say, oops, hang on, we've overshot. You know? So there can be things that look as if they're a brilliant idea, but you just need to think about the consequences.
But yes, the sort of summary is the university is always trying to improve. May not always hit the nail on the head, is kind of what you're getting at. But if it does make a mistake, it will try and rectify it. And none of the mistakes are big enough that they're going to ruin the university experience.
We just need to know, because also if you're talking about 18,000 people, students have got different preferences. And sometimes you'll have, a group of students saying, please let's not have exams. And others will be saying, wait a minute, that's what I'm really good at. So it's about trying to make sure that what we do is fair and equitable.
And also modern, because times have changed. I mean, I was just talking to a senior academic in the economics school, and he was saying how things have changed from 10 years ago, let alone from when he was at university, however long ago that was. I assume it was 20 years ago, but I don't know. I mean, the internet exists now. The internet didn't exist when you were at university, for example.
No.
I mean, that in itself is massive. And plus all the other technology that we've got now, and these things are innovating all the time. It's just hard to keep up with. But
yeah, and it's interesting because, you see somebody in a photo in a magazine or on, a picture on the internet or whatever, there they are doing their research, and it's always in some sort of real whizzy environment, like a lab with super machines and
they're
things.
pointing at a whiteboard with a pen and smiling. That's my favourite one.
And then it's like, well, if you're teaching, you're basically doing it in the same kind of way in some cases as when the University of Bologna was founded in the sort of 1300s. You think,
But how dare you? The University of Bologna is my favourite.
We've got to do some things a little bit differently.
Sometimes you've got to think outside the box, is what I'm getting at.
And that can be really exciting. But we need to adapt to where our students are coming from. Some of the kit that there is in schools now in terms of, interactive teaching is way in advance of what we've got in some parts of the university. So you're playing catch up, actually.
So I want to move on now to talking about soft power. The university-union relationship is quite complicated. Unless you're a sabbatical officer, it's quite hard to understand. Some of the faculty reps have probably got a pretty good grasp, and some of the school reps too, but it is not simple. Lots of people sort of come up to the union officers and say, we want you to do this and we want you to do this now, and that's not quite sort of the power the union holds. As we sort of highlighted on earlier, some unions aren't even in the room for the conversations. But when I talk about soft power, I sort of mean sort of the power of just being in the room, being able to have a voice. So soft power, April, how does it work from your perspective as a university staff member?
Well, I mean, I guess you mean just the intrinsic value of having student representation, of having students
how does it influence decisions? And
there isn't a single answer to that question.
Hence why it's so complicated.
I mean, Kent Union is an independent organisation, and the university is an independent organisation, and we're different kinds of bodies of organisations. So there are different rules and regulations that govern the way that the university works, the way that Kent Union works. The key about that independence is that we just need to respect that sometimes we work in different ways. But of course, students are right in between those two organisations. They're involved in Kent Union. You've got your representative function and organising a whole lot of other services and so on for students as well. And they're students of the university. So no wonder sometimes it gets a bit blurry in terms of who's doing what. Is this the union or is it the university? But I think the key thing for us is, how do we understand what students want and need? We can do that sometimes in a really direct way. So we're pushing at the moment for as many module conveners as possible to do mid-module evaluation. And it could be anything. It could just be a couple of questions on one of the on your device quiz programs, or it could be write a post-it note and stick it in a shoebox. We kind of don't care, as long as in the middle of your module sometime you get asked what's going well from your point of view as students doing this module, and what could be better. What do you think could be improved? So you can have that really direct relationship for some decisions where you can influence right there in the room. This is what we think we would like. And your lecturer should be coming back and saying either this is what we're going to do to bring that into being, or they'll come back and say, well, we've looked at this and here are the reasons why we can't do exactly that, but how would this be instead, But other times you need to have a representative structure. So we can't talk to absolutely every student about some particular issues, and maybe it's not just that one module that's impacted, it's the whole university if we're going to do things in a different way. And so in a case like that, you need your student reps and you need the union, because you're the ones who actually put together all of that work around student representatives, do the training and so on. You're good enough to invite some of us to be involved in that process.
When we feel like it.
It's basically a Kent Union enterprise, And I think the big gain there is the independence. Because
we can call you out, and we do call you out on the university out on things when we think that they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, we don't always agree on everything. Well, but that's healthy,
Well, without that relationship, one of us would just be placating the other one the whole time, and that wouldn't be constructive for either of us. Critical friend is probably how you describe it.
Yeah, totally.
Well, there's a lot of things that I agree with the university's done over the last couple of years, but there are some that I've gone, maybe not. I won't mention any now.
Well, then there will be other cases where you say, look, this is our priority.
Yes.
And I might be jumping up and down saying, but there's this thing that we really need to happen. But actually, you know what, if that's your priority and that's from discussions with the student body, that's your priority.
And we both
need to respect that.
Respect the other side's opinions on the matters, and we'll find a compromise and we'll keep going forwards. Which I think is one of the best things about Kent, is that we don't really fall out. We just go, okay, that's that decided. We'll make a compromise and we'll carry on, because there's lots of things to do all the time.
Yeah, and you do see cases in other institutions. Again, not talking about specifics, but where the student union, the student body feel that the only thing that they can do to get a point across is actually to boycott something, or to
occupy a building.
And actually, I've got the utmost respect for that. That's within the scope of politics in this country. It's fine. But if you really want to make something happen and make something happen quicker, actually let's take it through the structures that we've got and let's work in a mutually respectful way. And
I think it gets more done. I want to talk about the importance of being in the room. I'm going to click this pen into the microphone like a professional.
That's all right. I was squeaking my water bottle a minute ago.
Fine.
It was very squeaky.
Let's see if the mic picked that up after the fact. So the importance of being in the room. Now, what I mean by that is, for example, me and April, in my first year, we had meetings fortnightly. So I would get an hour with April every fortnight to talk about issues that I thought were affecting the student population. I have meetings for an hour with the deans every month. And just sort of that continuous sort of conversation of regularly seeing each other. I feel like university staff do end up picking up some of my battles and going, no, I agree with this and we should fight for it. I think that's definitely happened around space. I see a lot of university staff, because space, if you look at it objectively, the space campaign has been, we've so far got 2 common rooms. There's a paper going in about 2 months to a board to get finally approved. But the conversation around space at the university over the last 2 years, I have been told by university staff members, has completely changed from it not really being a topic of conversation to university staff members going, oh, what about the space for this? We need better space for this. And that's the kind of sort of soft influence that you can't really see. It doesn't come through committee structures, it doesn't come through papers. It comes through just how people talk about things. Yeah,
and it's bit by bit as well. You're right, it's cumulative.
Yeah, it's slow.
But it makes me smile, because quite often I'll hear somebody saying to you, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say kettles and microwaves.
I am going to say kettles and microwaves.
And I think that's brilliant, because it has actually changed the dimensions of that conversation. That I think that if you'd said students want more space, a couple of years ago it would have been, well, what do you mean? You mean bigger lecture rooms? Do you mean bigger rooms in halls of residence? Do you mean? But actually now there is this understanding that it means some space where you can relax and work, do something that crosses that boundary between sort of semi-social and semi-working.
Interact with your friends, interact with your lecturers.
Yeah, and not have to spend a shed load of money to do that.
Yeah, so library cafes, but everywhere, basically. And one of the things that's come out of that, like you just said, is microwaves and kettles. Students repeatedly ask for microwaves and kettles. Yeah. And previously SABs have sort of put that on the manifesto and pledged to do it, but it's been a very slow process of trying to change how they're perceived by the university and by how they're actually really good. Like, one's gone into the Senate chamber, and I've yet to have anyone email me saying, Stuart, this microwave has destroyed the university. It's outrageous. How dare you? So far, it seems to be going okay.
And you do get these sort of rhetorical devices, that people have got used to saying, oh, we can't have a microwave because who would clean it?
Yes. Oh, one's my favourite.
You've got a microwave in your house and you've got teenage children, speaking from personal experience, sometimes there's going to be a bit of a, well, in Scottish English we say a bit of a stooshy. There's going to be a bit of a stooshy about who cleans the microwave. Yeah, well, you can guess what it means. There will be a minor disagreement to be negotiated about who cleans the microwave. But it doesn't mean you're going to say, right, we're not going to have a microwave. I mean, it's a community. We've got to work our way around these things. And I think where having students in the room and having that conversation over a period of time is really valuable, is that people just can't get away with those stock responses anymore, you know.
No, they can't. Like, I've not heard, well, I have heard it recently, but I hear it a lot less than I used to. And you can notice it in conversations around the university. So people sometimes come up to me and they say, oh, I've done this thing, which is based around things that I've been saying for the last year and a half without me even needing to input on the thing at all. So effectively there I am getting things done without actively doing it myself, but merely by electing me and me saying what I believe in, people have adopted that into how they speak about spaces, or spaces in this situation, but also other things.
But I think it's really important, you know, you put it in a very elegant way, but behind this there's a question of why are we thinking about those spaces as well. And what you're saying and what people are now starting to hear and understand is that we've got a whole series of different characteristics as students who really, really benefit from having those sorts of spaces. So if you think about some of our student population where you've got mature students, you know, who will only be able to be on campus for a particular amount of time, they've got to be able to maximise that time that they've got between classes, for instance. If you think about commuting students who are going to have all their stuff with them, how can we start thinking about how we can help and support people who are in that kind of situation where they're not living right here on the campus, for instance. And I think that thinking about space, it's not just space, it's also about thinking how do we support students.
Because that one's specifically about community as well, and sort of incorporating everyone, because sometimes commuters and part-time students can feel a little bit isolated from their cohorts, and really the cohorts are sort of the core of the university experience. And I think space is such an important part of that. But we seem to have just started talking about how great space is, which is what happens when you speak to me for any length of time, as we have just covered.
I can testify to that.
But yeah, so it's that power of sort of being able to repeatedly say, this is still a problem, this is still a problem. And then the university staff sort of coming round, or not necessarily even coming round, they weren't against it to start with, just realising that, oh, this is more important than I've given it credit for before. And then talking about it more themselves, and again going away and doing things independently. I mean, maths put a common room in on their own without asking me. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started ringing the bell about common rooms for last year and a half, because those meetings include maths members of staff, which I'm pretty sure got the idea from those.
Well, I think actually when you and student reps are talking about particular priorities, it gives other students, they feel, you know, I'm not just speaking myself, nonsense. You know, just this one little voice, you know, about something being important, because they've heard their student representatives and their sabbatical officers saying this is a priority for us, and so, you know, they feel that they're working to get that same message across, and that has an impact on staff in academic schools as well, because actually, fundamentally, the great majority of our staff in the university are here because they want to help and support students to succeed. And if there's something, and if there's something you haven't thought about, and your students say, we'd really benefit from this, and it kind of chimes in your head with a message that you've heard from the student reps and from Kent Union, it's just going to have that bit more power behind it, you know.
Because another thing I want to sort of mention while we're on this topic is the library is an interesting one, because the library got more seats in it because it got refurbished. The amount of seats it got was, I had a series of conversations with the head of information services, John Still, about where we could put more chairs and what we could put more chairs in, and that kind of thing you don't sort of see as a student, because I'm basically suggesting to John, I think you should put something here, what do you think about that? And him going, oh, that's interesting, and then going away and think about it. And sometimes he does it, and sometimes he doesn't, and I come back and say, John, we still need more chairs, please. All the students want is chairs in the library and kettles and microwaves, but mainly chairs in the library. And you can that can get swept under the rug, because while that was me sort of repeatedly saying to John, we need more chairs in the library, you can just go, oh, that was because of the library getting refurbished. But there's a little bit more to it than that, and that sort of happens in lots of places.
Yeah,
or a sort of secret helping.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can work on more, is to think, are we involving students and student reps in the right kind of way where we've got a big project? So, where we've got a new building, where we've got a building being refurbished, are we asking students, is this the right thing? Is it designed in a student-facing way, And there may be things that we're desperate to do. We know that we can't do them immediately, but at least if we do design a project or a new building, we know that then it's going to be in line with what students want and need.
You'd hope that all the buildings were built like that, considering they're for students. Wouldn't you?
You would. But again, it's people have a particular way of working, not because it's perfect, but because it's what you've kind of, as it were, grown up with in your job. Yeah. So introducing a different way of thinking about it, making sure that we always think, what about student voice? And it is a cultural change. And cultural change is tricky for people, because it means sort of saying, well, the way that I've been doing it all these years isn't
maybe wasn't
quite right. Or maybe it was right then, but it isn't quite right now, which is the friendly way of looking at it.
And that does happen. That happens all the time. But this is the importance of electing, voting in the full-time elections and actually electing officers that you agree with. So I've been able to chair a point about space for 2 years, because people have said, I like space, I'll vote for him. But what if you don't care about space? What if you care about ILPs, or you care about timetabling? If you stand up, if you help them in their campaign, if you vote for them, make sure your friends vote for them, you can change the conversation around these university. It's not obvious, it's subtle, but it is important. It does change how people think. So that's my little plug to make sure you vote in the next election.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important, because sometimes, you do hear students saying, student reps, they're just in it for themselves, it's just about their CV. Well, of course, it is an advantage on your CV. You can't get away from that. But the student reps that I have had most to do with are actually really passionate about making changes, and I think we've got brilliant student reps, but actually there's always room for a few more.
Go on. I mean, I'll throw one more example in about student reps forcing positive change. Is I just came from a meeting about potentially installing winter exams. We're in the consultation phase at the moment. The union will go out and talk to students soon. We've talked to the student reps about it already, but a member of staff from maths said, I've spoken to the reps a lot about this year, 2 members of staff said it, and they said they're really positive about this. They really want this to happen, and that's a conversation that he's had with the students, and it's filtered into a bigger conversation about why they think this would be good, and that is super important, and why these roles are so essential, and how the small conversations you can have as a representative with members of staff do influence how things work and what happens.
And even if that isn't in place, if something changes and it isn't in place while you're at Kent, you're genuinely helping the students who are going to be here next. You take winter exams as an example. It's not that we're desperate to have loads more exams.
Yes.
It's just that at the moment, we're one of a small number of universities that says it's okay to learn about a subject between September and December and not actually do the exam in that subject until May or June. So you've got 5 or 6 months where you haven't been doing that thing, and you've got to get all back up to speed again at the end.
And it leads to situations
great.
where you have 8 exams in like 2 weeks, and it's just too much. So yes, just to clarify, because I forget, we have to explain sometimes. Winter exams is not more exams; it is just moving exams from the summer to January.
Yeah, moving them to right after you've learned the thing.
Yeah. Yes, and it's not policy yet either. It's just sort of an idea.
No, it's just something we're working on. But actually, you know what? If it's something you feel strongly about,
come talk to us. I'd love to chat to you. Leave it there. Happy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So, thank you for your time, April.
It's a pleasure.
Hopefully, the listeners if there are any, have found this interesting. And if not, we might be able to just cut it up and use it in little bits in our social media. So a win-win either way, I'd say.
Absolutely happy with that.
Anything else you would like to mention before we move? Before we leave? Or
No, just to say thanks for inviting me.
No worries.
Always happy to talk about the student experience.
Yes, cool. Thank you, April. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of The Office Hour. I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different episode with me and April. And we will see you again soon. Bye.